When they designed Warlocks, they sure succeeded at one thing, and that is making them different, because boy, they sure are. You get pack magic, spell slots, but of course they're different than everybody else's spell slots. Then you get Mystic Arcanum, which kind of are like spell slots, but they're not actually spell slots. And if you find that part a little bit confusing, and you don't know exactly what you should pick, then you're in luck, because behind today's secret door, best Warlock spells, levels 6 through 9. So behind today's secret door, best Warlock spells, levels 6 through 9. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. Alright, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo and Doug for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. Alright. So this is kind of a weird list to do, because we're talking about levels 6 through 9 for spell lists. So there's only a few spells on some of these levels. There's one level that only has 4. And when I do these lists, I generally try and pick the top 3, and then I try and give you an honorable mention, or maybe even more than one honorable mention. So what we're going to call this kind of like a guide. It's going to be kind of guide-ish and list-ish, I guess, is the way to look at it. So Mystic Arcanum is a bit different. So I'd like to just address some points that are worth noting, because I don't talk about the higher level play very often on the channel. So the first big point here with Mystic Arcanum, the one that's critical for the list portion of this, is that you only get one. And I'm not talking about just the one casting. That's kind of normal for high level spells, but you get to know one. So you better pick it right, and that's all you get. So you're not a divine caster that can just change them all tomorrow, and you're not a wizard who can just buy more spells. You get one. Now you can change it when you level up, but you're stuck with that spell selection for at least several sessions. It depends on how fast you level up. But there is a point to be made here about the Mystic Arcanum, and that is, of course, that it's not a spell slot. It's a casting. And this has obvious ramifications to it. Now, the first and obvious one is, because it's not a spell slot, well, that means that you can do that and cast another spell that does have a spell slot in the same turn. You would either have to have an extra action, or that other spell slot spell would have to be something that's coming out of a bonus action or a reaction. But it is a great point to remember, because let's say you have Misty Step as a spell slot, and you're going to cast that and then cast one of your Mystic Arcanums in the same turn. You can do that. That's a really nice advantage. Now, it gets a little bit better, because you're going to be able to cast your Mystic Arcanum, and if you do have Counterspell, you're one of the very few classes that can defend that spell slot with Counterspell. So if you cast your Mystic Arcanum and it gets Counterspelled, you have your reaction, and you haven't cast a spell slot that turn, you could cast Counterspell and counter their Counterspell. And you're one of the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer could pull this trick off with their Psionic spell list. But you're talking about level 6 beyond, and that's pretty rare territory to be able to pull something like this off. In fact, you can only do it from level 6 and beyond, and I think you're realistically the only class in the game that can be casting a spell slot that high and do something like this. Now, that's a really great advantage to have. But of course, because you're a Warlock, it's good and bad. So that's really, really good, right? The bad part is, if you do get counterspelled, it's over. That spell's gone. If you had cast it with a spell slot and it got countered, well, with the new counterspell rule, you would just simply have to wait a turn to cast it again. But when it's one that you can only use once in a day, like Mystic Arcanum work, then that's it. You have to defend that spell. So you can, but you almost have to, and it will depend on the encounter. There are obviously going to be encounters where that's never going to be a thing that's going to come up. But if you suspect that you're going to be running into an encounter where that could happen, you're going to want to make sure you're walking in with a counterspell. So by the time you are going to hit 11th levels, which is when you would get your level 6 Arcanums, you are going to want to be sure that if you haven't taken counterspell by that point, that you take it. The other point of consideration here, because normally speaking, when I do a spell list like this, I'm just picking the best spells. I may have some kind of methodology, but generally speaking, I'm going to just pick for you what I think are the best spells. But with a Warlock, it's a bit different. You know, as the theme goes, they're a bit different, and they have a different kind of playing style than a full caster would be, because they're kind of like a full caster, but they're not. So very rarely is a Warlock going to be considered mostly a caster. But by this point, you now have 3 spell slots for your pack magic, which means that if you have a short rest, you've got 6, and then with your magical cunning, you've got 2 more. So you've got 8 castings in a day, and I generally figure you've got about 12 rounds of combat in an adventuring day. That sounds like you can be casting 8 out of 12. It depends. I mean, you got to remember that there's going to be some spells you're going to be wanting to cast outside of combat and all that, but still you could be casting quite a bit. Aside from that, however, if you went with something like Pact of the Blade, which is a really popular playstyle, well, that's a whole different thing now. Now it's not a question of whether you're a full caster, it's what are your spells going to be doing for you as somebody that's wanting to go into melee all the time. So I took some consideration in how I was choosing spells and tried to make the case for them in my head based on what a Warlock's or popular Warlock playing styles would be. Could that spell be of particular value? And in some cases, there's a 9th level spell that comes to mind on this list that I would never, ever want to pick as a wizard ever. But for a Warlock, well, maybe. It could be actually very valuable. And we'll see when we get there. So just keep those things in mind. Playstyle, the fact that you've only got 1, that's all you get is the 1. And that Mystic Arcanum is not a slot, and therefore it can be cast in conjunction with other things in the same turn. And you could theoretically defend it with a counterspell if you had to. So at 6th level, we are going to start at the number 3 position here. We're going to actually have 2 spells because it will just depend on which playstyle you're really wanting to go. I'm not recommending that you actually want to take a number 3 spell. I think you should want to look at the number 1. But if this really appeals to you, then pick one of these 2. And that would be either Summon Fiend or Circle of Death. If you go with Summon Fiend, you're going to get a Devil. I would pick the Devil probably. That's going to be doing actually really good DPR. Now at level 11, its value is not going to be as great as it would be at earlier levels, but it's still a significant bump in your DPR. But then there's Circle of Death. Now Summon Fiend is obviously concentration. Circle of Death is area of effect, but it's a 60-foot radius. So while I would imagine that by this level you took Synaptic Static, which is a great area of effect, this dwarfs that in terms of area of effect. Now, you might argue that Synaptic Static is going to perform better for different reasons, but that kind of an area of effect is hard to pass up. The damage between the two is actually kind of like, in terms of an individual target, is actually comparable, but Circle of Death obviously has a huge upside in terms of total damage dealt. I mean, with that kind of an area, you're hitting the encounter with that spell. So, is it valuable? Of course it is. Summon Fiend, not only are you getting that DPR, but you're getting something that's going to be absorbing some enemy attacks, one would think. And that, of course, is valuable too. So depending on your playstyle, you might want to pick one of those, but they're at the number 3 position, in my opinion. And at number 2, we have Arcane Gate. Now, this and the number 1 were both on the honorable mentions for the Wizard when I did the Wizard spell list, which should show you something about what your pickings are. Because you are picking your best spells are their, honorable mentions on the Wizard spell list. And that kind of is how this all goes, except for one particular spell. There are actually a couple of other spells that did make in the top 3 on this list, but there's one that's of particular note. Anyway, Arcane Gate is essentially Dimension Door that lasts for 10 minutes. It's got the exact same range, and so you're going to be able to move people around in that teleportation of 500 feet for 10 minutes. So it could be good for infiltration. It could be good for simply just navigating a difficult problem, a terrain problem. That's going to come up in D&D all the time, particularly in kind of cases where you need to go somewhere and then just get right back easily. Then Arcane Gate is going to do some real great things for the party. So it's a really nice utility spell. I love Dimension Door I love the ability for Dimension Door to save your bacon the most, but I do love it for utility. Arcane Gate is strictly utility. And then at number 1, we have Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. Now, I happen to love this spell. So I do have a slight preference for it myself. If you're not familiar with the spell, you're able to, when you cast it, you're able to create a cauldron that's going to create a number of potions equal to your spellcasting modifier, which by this level, 11th level, which is the quickest you could get this, presumably you have a +5 to your charisma. So 5 potions that are common or uncommon can be created by this cauldron. If that's there while you're in combat, a party member or yourself will be able to withdraw one of those potions for a bonus action, which is great. Now, the big thing about this, why it's so great, there's multiple reasons, but one of the things is that those potions stay. So if you don't use them, they are part of the game world until you cast that spell again, or until, of course, they're consumed. So this would allow you to precast and have 5 uncommon potions that are going to be available to you in advance, and then you could get the spell slot back. So it's kind of like Goodberry in that respect. And whenever you can do something like that, that has enormous value. And then, of course, there's just the fact that you get to choose what you want the potion to be. So, because it can be common or uncommon, I mean, Potion of Climbing is a reasonably good potion, and that's a common potion. But when we get into the uncommon ones, obviously there's, you can get a better healing potion out of it, and that's always going to be useful. That's always something you're going to want to consider just having as a default. But then we're talking about things like Potion of Resistance. So you're going in to face a certain kind of creature that has a certain kind of energy type. You make the potion for that energy type, and 5 of your party members have resistance to that potion without it picking up concentration or anything else. That's a really nice ability to have. And of course, you can just change that based on what you think you're going to be facing. So Potion of Resistance, really nice. And this can all be changed from every time you cast the spell. Then there's things like Potion of Growth, and that's a really great one for martial characters. Potion of Pugilism, if you have more than one monk in the party, they'll love that spell. But Potion of Growth is really, really useful for a lot of martial characters. Then you get into things that are really kind of fun, like Potion of Fire Breath. So you're a warlock, right? You have a familiar from Pact of the Chain, right? Well, you give it to your familiar, and now as a bonus action with that Potion of Fire Breath, they're able to hit targets 3 times before that potion expires, that they're going to take 4d6, make a saving throw for half. So that's about 10 points of damage that you're going to be able to be extracting out of your familiar 3 times. And if you were to make 5 of these, that's the adventuring day. You're going to be able to extract a lot of value out of this for your familiar. That's not only just action economy, that's extracting value, because your familiar will still be able to do their normal thing. So if you did this to the pseudo-dragon's running around, and you don't need the invocation to get them to do this. The potion gives them the ability to do this. So if you have the pseudo-dragon running around and it's doing its sting, and now it's got fire breath, that's a really great ability to be able to give to. Right? It's the one of the big reasons why a warlock really wants to consider Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. It's just that little extra on top that makes it really, really fun. And of course, you don't have to always do that. So you could just be doing that for fights where it's going to be really tough. It's a single target. It's not a cone or something like that. But it's a nice little extra to be able to get. But the big one, the one that I think that has the most flexibility and the most utility to it is going to be making oil of slipperiness. Because if you put it on yourself, or if a character puts it on themselves, they basically get freedom of movement. And there are other bonuses aside from that. And you have the flexibility of being able to basically not put it on someone, but to throw it to the ground like a grenade that it turns into a grease spell. Now, that may not sound overwhelming, but grease is actually one of those things that can be a surprisingly effective little thing to do. And again, we're talking about 5 of these. And in the right situations, in the right moment, and again, if you were to give this to your familiar, they could just be popping these all over the place. So this is another, and if you did have the familiar and you went with a potion of healing, you can be handing those to the imp, and the imp can be running around being a paramedic. Just the synergy that this Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron has for anybody that's going to run Pact of the Chain is enormous. Must take for a Pact of the Chain. And in general, I think probably a must take. Then at 7th level, we get, for our number 3 pick, again, we have 2 choices. This is the level that only has 4 total choices here. So, and believe me, you're taking the number 1 pick here. So these are we're just performing a little dance here to perform out the list. At the number 3, sharing that spot would be both Etherealness and Finger of Death. I happen to have a certain kind of liking for Finger of Death, even though I dislike individual save or suck spells. This, of course, is a Finger of Death, so it's a little bit different than a save or suck, but you get my point. Etherealness, I like a great deal for general utility, but not enough to even think about not taking the number 1 spot. The number 2 spot, we have Plane Shift, which is a great spell. If number 1 did not live on this list, then you might, or if the number 1 spell were not what the number 1 spell is, then Plane Shift would be something to take a good look at. It's a very useful spell, but not nearly as much as number 1. And number 1 is Force Cage. Force Cage, you don't get Wall of Force as a Warlock. Force Cage is better. It's not necessarily orders of magnitude better than Wall of Force, like some people might think, but it is better. And you didn't get Wall of Force, and now you get this, and you take it, and you cackle and laugh. This is a spell that can shut down an encounter, and there is very, very little the DM can do about it. And one of the things that the DM can do about it, pretty much only you can stop them from. Because if a wizard were to cast Force Cage, they're vulnerable to counterspell, but not you. You drop Force Cage, and one of their primary weapons of getting rid of that before it even happens is gone. So in your hands, incredibly powerful. And that's why you must take it. You're obligated to take it in terms of what you're bringing to the party at that point. You're doing your party a disservice by not having such a potent spell that you could defend. Yeah, it's hard to argue with Force Cage, but the fact that you also are able to pull that trick off makes it a must take. Now, here we are at 8th level. Now, in the number 3 spot is a spell that, as I was looking at it, and I looked at it very strongly for the wizard as well, in the end, I couldn't justify it on the wizard list, even though 8th level spells don't really wow me. So this was one I was actually looking at fairly strongly at for the wizard. 2 of the spells on this list show up on my wizard list, but not this one. And it is on their list, but this didn't quite make it. And that's Power Word Stun. Now, Power Word Stun, if the creature has fewer than 150 hit points, then they have the stun condition. Period. End of discussion. They have the stun condition. Then they start getting, in future rounds, they get a Constitution saving throw to remove the stun condition. Now, what I like about this, and this is the kind of process that really, as I began to think it through, was the final point for me, the point for this. You could argue that this might be even a little bit higher, but Let's just keep things in perspective. It's just one turn, realistically. The kinds of creatures you're going to be facing when you are now a 15th level character to have 8th level spells, Power Word Stun doesn't care about the party or the creature's defenses. It doesn't care. You got immunity to this, you got resistance to that. Okay, fine. Do you have less than 150 hit points? Oh, you do have less than 150? Okay, you're stunned. Yeah, no, you don't get a saving throw. Oh, you have a legendary saving throw? No, you don't get that either. See what I mean? So even though it's just one round, it's a really bad effect to have to deal with for just one round. At this level of play where you could really just womp on things when you've got that kind of an advantage. Now, if it is a creature that has legendary saving throws, it goes without saying that they're going to save in the next turn. They're either going to make the roll or they're going to use a legendary save. So this is a one-round thing, but it's a one-round thing that you're able to get past anything that DM has other than the fact that you have to know that they're less than 150 hit points. Now, to some folks, that's a disqualifier. And if it is for you, that's fine. I understand. But with some experience, you'll be able to kind of get that feel pretty well. Your big danger problem is when you try and get the most value. So when you think that they could first possibly be at 150 or less, is not when you cast the spell. You want to cast it in that area where you can be reasonably certain, because you've only got that one shot at it. There's no point in doing it early and therefore wasting the spell. But if you feel like it's reasonably certain you're counting out the damage, maybe you don't like doing that. And if you don't use this spell. But if you can count the damage out in your head and get a reasonable idea of where things should be, if you know that the creature's bloodied, for example, I mean, that's a thing now. So if you know that they're bloodied, that's pretty much a good tip off. There's plenty of things that you're going to be able to have clues and cues that will go off during the combat of when to cast this spell. It's the fact that it's other than that sticking point, everything else, the DM can't do anything really about it, except counter it. Oh, but wait, you can counter it back. So definitely one that I would think about using just simply because of that. And the ability to get that in there, it's a really bad condition to have to deal with for one round. Can your party take advantage of it? That's the other reason to take it. If your party is not one that advantage isn't going to make a big difference and all that type of stuff, then don't bother. But if you are one of those parties and that is going to make a big difference, then yeah, you could really clean up with a spell like that. Now, for the 8th level spell, number 2 and number 1 slots, you could easily interchange either of these. I'm going to list Demiplane here at number 2. Demiplane is a spell that has a lot of uses. I mean, it also gives you that feeling of really having arrived as a caster, because you're creating interdimensional pockets that kind of stay there forever, and you can use them for different things. So if you can open your mind to things like that and what you could use those kind of pocket little dimensions for, then this is a great spell. You could use them as hiding places. You could use them as prisons, storage, whatever the case. There's going to be a good, solid use for them. And then there's going to be things that'll come up in the moment that only Demiplane could do. And so for those kind of reasons, I love spells like that. I'm actually, if you haven't got this from me already throughout all these videos, I'm not the biggest fan of the big muscle spells. Those don't really do it for me. I mean, in terms of like the big damage spells, I love doing lots of damage, but not from direct damage spells. I don't like them very much. I like doing lots of damage as a martial character, but I like, if I've got spells, I want them, generally speaking, for control, or if I'm going to get damage from it, it has to be repeatable damage for me to get really excited about a damage spell. But that's just me. So Demiplane has a lot of value. Now, the number 1 spell here, Dominate Monster, has some... I don't want to oversell this, because it's not like this amazingly uber powerful spell. It's a good spell. it does what you would think given how these spells work these days. The ability to flip a creature from enemy to servant, yeah, or enemy to ally in the combat is really, really, really useful. That flip is incredibly powerful. It can tip an entire combat. Now, if you do it while you're already fighting, they have advantage. So don't cast it while you're fighting whenever you can. I mean, you don't always have to use these things in combat. So whenever possible, don't. But if you do cast it in combat, the advantage isn't going to be all that big of a whoop because you're a 15th level character by this point. So your charisma modifier is going to be +5. Your proficiency bonus is +5. And even though I normally don't account for magic items, let's be real. You're a 15th level warlock, and if you don't have a +3 to your DC from something, there's something wrong, especially in this climate of crafting stuff and all that. So your DC is easily going to be 20 or 21 at this point. Now, if that's the case, having advantage on wisdom sounds bad. Not that bad. You can certainly pick a creature that's not going to have a great save against this. Now, the problem really is not that. The problem is that it's a charm condition. So there's going to be plenty of creatures out there. The ones that you really want to charm the most are the ones that you don't even get a shot at because they're immune to charmed. There's about 20 to 30% of the creatures that are going to be immune to the charm condition. So you just have to know that going in. So if those problems bother you with Dominate Monster, don't take it. But it does have an enormous upside to it. Like I said, you could easily change from this to Demiplane interchangeably as to which should be number 1 or number 2. I'm just putting them in this way because Dominate Monster affects combat or can be cast in combat to effect. Those generally have a certain level of primacy in these lists, in my opinion. And then we get to 9th level. Okay. At the number 3 spot, we have a spell that I like, but I wouldn't ever think about doing it for something like a wizard, ever. But because a warlock is different, and especially like a Pact of the Blade warlock, this is a spell that you might just take, even though it's the number 3. If you went Pact of the Blade, this could be your number 1 pick. And that's Foresight. Now, this isn't a spell that reads all that great until you actually think it through a little bit. It lasts for 8 hours. It doesn't require concentration. And you get advantage on every single D20 test. Every single one of them. That's attack rolls, concentrations, saves, perception checks, blah, 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 blah. Everything. Intimidation, persuasion, deception, everything. And it doesn't have concentration, so you can't lose it. It's really, really good. Foresight can subsume other things underneath it because of it. Combat and skill checks and initiative and everything. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's an enormous amount of get for a spell like that. Of course, it's a 9th level spell, but then you also get the advantage of anything that's opposing you that is attacking you or whatever, they get disadvantage. Now, if you're Pact of the Blade, that's a big deal. That's happening every single round. You're going to be drawing attacks. They all get disadvantage and you get advantage. It's not only all that is really fun, but it's got style to it and it lasts all day, 8 hours. So that may not last every last minute of an adventuring day. You might have hangover, but I mean, come on. For the vast bulk of it, you're covered. And it's going to feel great because it's also going to make you virtually crit proof because if they're making attack rolls with disadvantage, that changes a 1 in 20 chance to a 1 in 400 chance of them critting on you. So because of the Warlock's playstyle, I think that this is one that you should definitely consider taking it. I'm not saying it's the best spell, but you're going to get an enormous amount of value out of it. So would you rather have that one spell that really does a big impact on the encounter, or the one spell that makes everything that happens for the rest of that day go your way? That's kind of tough to say no to, but it's only because of the Warlock playstyle. I would not do this for a wizard. They're not making enough rolls, normally speaking. And at that level, I'm ending things quickly as a 17th level wizard. So I'm not too worried about that kind of stuff. But for a warlock like this, Pact of the Blade Warlock in particular, yeah, super great spell. And then we get to number 2. And this is the one that I really wanted so desperately to get into the honorable mention for the wizard, and I couldn't do it. And as I was making the case for it, and intellectually, when you have spells that are not as good, you have to start making the case for them. So that's my intellectual process in there, is I looked at each spell and I made the case for that spell. And when it came to this one, which I have a certain level of affection for, it's been around for as long as the game has been around. So when I was a little kid, many, many years ago, I always looked at the spell and went, wow, what a cool spell. And that spell, of course, is Power Word Kill. Now, Power Word Kill, like its cousin, Power Word Stun, its threshold is 100 hit points, which is weird because it's a higher level spell, but the threshold goes down. But that's because if they have fewer than 100 hit points, they're dead. No saving throw, no nothing. They're dead. So everything I said about Power Word Stun before, Power Word Kill, 60-foot range, only a verbal component, which is presumably the word, which of course you're going to make up, right? Shazam, whatever the spell is, the word is, make up that killing word for sure if you take this spell. And everybody, you won't even have to say I cast Power Word Kill. You just say the word. And that is cool. And being a warlock, half of being a warlock is about cool. So it is one that I really want you to think about doing because, again, it doesn't care about your immunities. You may be looking at it and saying, well, at most it's doing 100 points of damage. No. Most creatures at this point have resistances all over the place or outright immunities. It's doing double that in lots of cases because it's ignoring all of those things. All you have to know is that it's under 100 hit points. Now, if it does still have it, you're still doing psychic damage to it, and it's reasonable damage, but they might be resistant to that psychic damage, but you at least get something out of it. But the fact that you're able to just bypass all those resistances, and then the really cruel one is that legendary save, that creature, it has one or many of them, doesn't matter. Bye-bye. You're gone. Good night. I don't want to oversell it. It's one of the best spells you have available to you, though, at 9th level, for sure. But it's those legendary saves to be able to just bypass all those. I mean, bypassing the saving throw in general is amazing. But when you consider that it's those legendary saving throws are just gone, that's just great. And again, that's just got panache and style. You can only do it once a day, but man. Now, I'm going to bring this up. I don't like this style of play. I don't like it, but it isn't my job to tell you how to play the game. There's nothing morally wrong with this. It's just simply something I don't like it, and I speak for a lot of other players, and that is PvP. This spell has enormous value in PvP. Now, if you're a player like me who hates PvP and would strongly consider leaving the group if PvP were just a regular part of the game, I wouldn't want to play in a game like that. But if I were sticking around in a situation like that and I had Power Word Kill, I wouldn't be using it on other party members, but they would know that I have it. And they would, generally speaking, you're not going to get messed with in PvP. So I'm not saying it's something that you should be using as a club on another player in PvP, but if you're a player that's in a PvP group and you are like me and you don't like it, it is a great way. It's like a nuclear deterrent kind of an ability because there's nothing they can do about it. And again, you can counter their counter spell. And then at number 1 is one that I wanted to put into the honorable mention also for the wizard, and I just couldn't quite get there. And that is, number 1, is True Polymorph. Now, as a warlock, you don't even get Polymorph on your 4th level spell list. The wizard does. So in the scheme of everything, and because of the scale of the spell, really, it's a very flexible spell, really great spell. But for my 9th level spells, I want there to be something that I haven't already been able to do. So like with Power Word Kill, killing with, without a saving throw is enormously powerful. Like, granted, there are conditions to it, but you couldn't do that before now. And for the warlock, your scope is smaller, and you don't have polymorph. So this is it's a really powerful spell. So I really like the spell. I liked it for the wizard, but just not quite enough considering the other competition that the wizard has. But for you, for the warlock, yeah, you want to take True Polymorph. Now, I think that you should consider Power Word Kill, but you should be looking at True Polymorph as your default choice and then compare them, and what you like best, you take. True Polymorph is going to be far more flexible. It does many different things. It can do a lot of different things. It's like Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron. It is kind of that Swiss Army knife of spell. It can serve many, many, many different situations. And so for that reason, it's a really great spell. All right, well, that's the list for the Warlock. I hope you found it useful. There's a lot of fun stuff, even though a lot of it may feel like you are reduced to the bargain bin of spells. There's still some really good ones in there. Just because you can't have a Ferrari doesn't mean your Porsche stinks, right? It's still a Porsche. So there's some really good ones in there. Well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast Bless on all of you.